The rain was coming down in that annoying way where it's not quite heavy enough to use an umbrella, but just enough to make everything damp and uncomfortable. Rebecca stood at the end of her driveway, pulling mail from the box while trying to keep the envelopes from getting soaked. Bills as usual, a few advertisements for pizza places she'd never order from, a postcard reminding her about her dental appointment next month, and then she saw it. The cream-colored envelope stopped her cold. Her name was written across the front in handwriting she would recognize anywhere, even after all these years. The letters slanted to the right in that particular way, with the capital R done in a flourish that nobody else ever did quite the same. There was no return address, no name in the corner, nothing to officially confirm who it was from, but she knew. Rebecca's heart started beating faster. Her hands, already cold from the October drizzle, began to shake just slightly. She stood there in the rain, staring at that envelope like it might explode if she moved too quickly. Around her, the world kept going. A car drove past, splashing through a puddle. Her neighbor's dog barked from inside their house. The rain kept falling, but for Rebecca, everything had stopped. The envelope was from her sister. From Claire. The sister she hadn't spoken to in 15 years. 15 years. Rebecca could hardly believe it had been that long. When she really thought about it, the number seemed impossible. 15 years ago, she'd been in her early 30s. Her kids had been babies. She'd lived in a different house, in a different neighborhood, in a different life entirely. She'd moved 3 times since then, changed her phone number twice. Even her last name was different now, after the divorce and then remarrying. So how had Claire found her? How did her sister know where to send this letter? Rebecca finally moved, walking back toward her house with the mail clutched against her chest, trying to protect it from the rain. Her mind was racing. The last time she'd seen Claire had been at their mother's funeral. That terrible day when everything that could go wrong did go wrong, when words were said that couldn't be taken back, when something so small and stupid had torn them apart, their mother's jewelry. That's what had done it. A few pieces of costume jewelry that probably weren't worth more than a couple $100 total, but had meant the world to both of them because Mom had worn them. There had been a misunderstanding about who was supposed to get what. Claire had thought their mother had promised her the pearl necklace. Rebecca was certain Mom had wanted her to have it. Looking back now, it all seemed so ridiculous, so pointless, but at the time, both of them had been drowning in grief. And that small disagreement had become the outlet for all the pain and confusion they were feeling. They'd fought, said horrible things to each other, and then they'd just stopped talking. At first, Rebecca had thought it would blow over. She'd figured that after a week or two, one of them would pick up the phone and apologize, and they'd laugh about how silly they'd been. But a week became a month. A month became 6 months, and somewhere along the way, the silence became its own thing. A living, breathing wall between them that got thicker and harder to break through with every passing day. Now, standing in her kitchen with the envelope in her hand, Rebecca wondered if she should even open it. Part of her wanted to tear it into tiny pieces and throw it away. That part of her remembered the hurt, the anger, the bitter loneliness of losing her only sister. That part wanted to protect herself from whatever might be inside. But there was another part of her too. A smaller, quieter part that remembered building pillow forts with Claire when they were kids. Playing dress-up in their mother's old clothes, staying up late on school nights, whispering and giggling until their dad yelled at them to go to sleep. That part of her desperately wanted to know what Claire had written after all this time. Rebecca set the envelope on her kitchen counter and stared at it while she made coffee. She was still staring at it 10 minutes later when her husband Tom came in from the garage. "What's wrong?" he asked immediately. He'd gotten good at reading her moods over the years. Rebecca pointed at the envelope. "It's from Claire." Tom's eyebrows went up. He knew the whole story, of course. She'd told him everything when they first started dating, explaining why she never talked about her sister, why there were no family photos with Claire in them, why holidays were sometimes hard for her. "Are you going to open it?" he asked gently. "I don't know," Rebecca admitted. "Part of me wants to, but part of me thinks it's better to just leave the past in the past, you know? We've both moved on. Why reopen old wounds?" Tom came over and put his arm around her shoulders. "I can't tell you what to do," he said, "but I will say this. You've mentioned Claire at least once a month for the entire time I've known you. You wonder what she's doing. You think about calling her on her birthday. You get sad around the holidays because she's not there. I don't think the wound ever really closed, honey. It's just been sitting there all this time. Rebecca knew he was right. She'd tried to move on, tried to act like it didn't matter that her only sister was essentially a stranger now. But it did matter. It mattered every single day. Still, she couldn't bring herself to open the envelope right then. She left it on the counter and went about her day, but she was aware of it every moment. It was like having a small fire burning in the house. She couldn't see it from every room, but she knew it was there. That evening after dinner, her daughter Amy noticed the envelope. "What's this?" she asked, picking it up. "Just a letter," Rebecca said quickly, taking it back. "Who's it from?" Amy was 12 and at that age where she was curious about everything. Rebecca hesitated. "It's from your Aunt Claire." Amy's eyes widened. "I have an Aunt Claire? Since when?" The question hit Rebecca like a punch to the stomach. Since when? Since always. Since before Amy was even born. But her daughter didn't know that. Rebecca had talked about her sister so rarely that Amy had grown up thinking she didn't have an aunt at all. "You've always had an Aunt Claire," Rebecca said quietly. We haven't talked in a long time. Why not?" Amy asked with that innocent directness that kids have. "We had a fight," Rebecca said. "A really bad one. And then too much time passed and it became hard to fix." Amy looked at the envelope, then back at her mother. "Are you going to read it?" "I think so," Rebecca said. "I just need a little time to work up to it." After Amy went to bed, Rebecca sat in her kitchen with a cup of tea, staring at that envelope again. Her hands were steadier now, but her heart was still racing. She thought about Claire constantly now, wondering what the letter said. Was it an apology? An accusation? Did Claire need something? Was she sick? Was something wrong? The questions multiplied in her mind until she couldn't stand it anymore. Finally, just before midnight, Rebecca picked up the envelope. Her hands were shaking again as she carefully opened it, trying not to tear the paper. Inside were 3 pages, covered front and back with Claire's distinctive handwriting. Rebecca took a deep breath and began to read. Rebecca's hands trembled as she unfolded the first page. The paper was thick and expensive, the kind Claire had always liked even when they were younger. She could almost smell her sister's perfume on it, though that was probably just her imagination playing tricks. The letter started with 2 simple words. "Dear Becca." Nobody had called her Becca in 15 years. It was Claire's nickname for her, something that had started when they were kids because Claire couldn't quite pronounce Rebecca when she was learning to talk. Everyone else called her Rebecca or Beck or sometimes Becky, but to Claire, she'd always been Becca. Seeing that name written in her sister's handwriting made Rebecca's eyes immediately fill with tears. "I've written this letter at least 30 times," Claire had written. "I have a drawer full of attempts, all crumpled up or torn in half because I couldn't find the right words. I'm still not sure these are the right words, but I'm running out of time to be perfect. So here goes nothing." Rebecca read slowly, savoring each sentence even though part of her wanted to rush through and get to the point. "I'm not writing to talk about the fight," the letter continued. "I know what happened. You know what happened. We both said things we shouldn't have said, and we both did things we shouldn't have done. I could spend pages apologizing for my part in it, and maybe I should. But that's not really why I'm writing." Rebecca's heart sank a little. If Claire wasn't writing to apologize or to rehash the fight, then what was this about? "I'm writing because I have a daughter," Claire continued. "Her name is Natalie. She's 14 years old, and she's the most amazing person I've ever met. She's smart and funny and kind, and sometimes when I look at her, I see us. I see you and me at that age before life got so complicated. A daughter." Rebecca sat back in her chair trying to process this. Claire had a daughter, a 14-year-old daughter, which meant Claire had been pregnant when their mother died or got pregnant shortly after. And Rebecca had no idea. She'd missed the entire pregnancy, the birth, 14 years of her niece's life. The realization hit her hard. She'd thought the price of their silence had been losing Claire. But it was so much bigger than that. She'd lost an entire branch of her family tree, a niece she'd never met, birthday parties she'd never attended, first days of school she'd never heard about. "Natalie started asking questions about my family a few months ago," the letter went on. "She wanted to know about her grandparents, and I told her about Mom and Dad. She asked if I had any brothers or sisters, and I've always avoided that question. I'd tell her about our cousins or change the subject. But she's 14 now and she's not a little kid anymore. She kept pushing. Rebecca could picture the scene. She remembered being that age, full of questions about everything, determined to understand the world and where she fit into it. Finally, about 3 weeks ago, she found an old photo album I'd forgotten was in the attic. There were pictures of us as kids, you and me at the beach, the Halloween where we dressed as matching pumpkins, your high school graduation, our trip to Disney World when I was 16 and you were 19. She brought the album down and asked me point blank who you were. Rebecca remembered that Disney trip. It had been magical. Claire had just gotten her heart broken by some boy, and Rebecca had used her tax return to take her little sister on a trip to cheer her up. They'd stayed in the cheapest hotel they could find and eaten gas station snacks to save money, but they'd had the best time. They'd laughed until they cried on the spinning teacup ride. They'd stayed until the park closed every single night. I couldn't lie to her anymore, Claire wrote, so I told her everything. I told her about you, about the fight, about how I'd been too stubborn and too hurt to fix things. I told her that she had an aunt she'd never met, cousins she didn't know about. And you know what she said to me? Rebecca held her breath, waiting. She said, "So fix it, Mom." Just like that, like it was the simplest thing in the world. I tried to explain that it was complicated, that too much time had passed, that you probably hated me. She looked at me with those big eyes of hers and said, "You won't know unless you try." A small smile crossed Rebecca's face despite everything. This niece she'd never met sounded like she had some wisdom beyond her years. "It took me 2 months to work up the courage to find you," the letter continued. "I hired someone, actually. A private investigator. I know that sounds dramatic, but I didn't know where you were. I knew you'd moved from your old place. I tried looking you up online but couldn't find you. I was starting to think maybe you'd changed your name or moved out of state. So that's how Claire had found her." Rebecca felt a strange mix of emotions about that. Part of her was touched that Claire had gone to such lengths. Part of her was a little unsettled that it had been so easy for a stranger to track her down. "The investigator found you in 2 days," Claire wrote. 2 days to locate 15 years of lost time. When he gave me your address, I just stared at it. You're only 40 minutes away from me. 40 minutes. We've been living 40 minutes apart for who knows how long, and I had no idea. 40 minutes. Rebecca did the quick math in her head. She'd moved to this neighborhood 6 years ago. Had Claire been that close the whole time? "Here's the real reason I'm writing," Claire continued, and Rebecca could sense that they were finally getting to the heart of it. "I'm not expecting anything from you. I'm not asking you to forgive me or to forget what happened or to suddenly want to be sisters again. What I'm asking is much smaller and much bigger at the same time." Rebecca turned to the second page, her heart pounding. "Would you meet me for coffee? Just once, just the two of us, in a place where neither of us has any history. I'll buy. You don't have to stay long. If you want to leave after 5 minutes, I'll understand. But Natalie made me promise to try, and I've realized that I need to try for myself too." The words blurred on the page as Rebecca's eyes filled with tears again. "I miss you, Becca. I've missed you every single day for 15 years. I've picked up the phone 1,000 times and put it down again. I've driven past your old house more times than I can count, hoping I might see you. I've imagined running into you at the grocery store or at a restaurant rehearsing what I would say, but I've never had the courage to actually reach out until now." Rebecca had to stop reading for a moment. She set the letter down and wiped her eyes. Tom had gone to bed hours ago, and the house was quiet except for the sound of the refrigerator humming and the rain that had started up again outside. She thought about all the times she'd almost reached out too. The birthdays when she'd typed out a text message and then deleted it. The Christmas cards she'd addressed but never mailed. The times she'd seen someone who looked like Claire from behind and her heart had jumped before she realized it was a stranger. Taking a deep breath, Rebecca picked up the letter again. "I know I hurt you," Claire had written. "I know I said terrible things at Mom's funeral, things I can never take back. I was angry and grieving, and I took it all out on you. I've regretted it every day since. But here's what I've learned in 15 years. Being right isn't worth being alone. Pride isn't worth losing your only sister, and no amount of jewelry or money or stuff is worth what we've lost." Those words hit Rebecca hard because she'd learned the same lesson, but learning it and acting on it were two different things. "There's a coffee shop called The Daily Grind on Route 47, Claire continued. "It's about halfway between where you live and where I live. I'll be there next Saturday at 2 in the afternoon. I'll wait for 1 hour. If you don't come, I'll understand. I'll be disappointed and heartbroken, but I'll understand. And I won't bother you again. This will be my one attempt, and if you're not ready, I'll respect that. Rebecca checked the date on the letter. It had been postmarked 3 days ago. Next Saturday was in 4 days. But if you do come, the letter went on, if you walk through that door, I promise you this. I won't make excuses. I won't try to rewrite history. I'll just be grateful for the chance to sit across from you again, to see your face, to hear your voice, to maybe, possibly, start to find our way back to each other. The third page had less writing on it. Claire's handwriting got a bit messier here, like she'd been writing faster, or maybe crying. I've attached a photo of Natalie. She asked me to include it. She said she wants you to know what she looks like, just in case. She's beautiful, Becca. She has your smile. I never noticed it until recently, but it's your smile exactly. Same dimple on the left side, same way it lights up her whole face. Rebecca flipped the page over, and there it was. A school photo of a teenage girl with dark hair and bright eyes, wearing a blue sweater and a genuine, joyful smile. And Claire was right. That smile was familiar. Rebecca saw it every time she looked in the mirror. I hope you'll come, Claire had written at the very bottom. But if you can't, or if you're not ready, I understand. Either way, know that I love you. I've always loved you. And I'm sorry for all the time we've lost. The letter was signed simply, Your sister Claire. Rebecca sat in her dark kitchen for a long time, holding that letter and looking at the photo of her niece. A niece who had pushed her mother to reach out. A niece who wanted to know her aunt. A niece with Rebecca's own smile. Saturday was in 4 days. 4 days to decide if she was brave enough to walk through that coffee shop door. Rebecca didn't sleep at all that night. She lay in bed next to Tom, staring at the ceiling, replaying the letter in her mind over and over. Every word, every sentence. The photo of Natalie sitting on her nightstand. Those familiar eyes staring out at her in the darkness. When morning came, she was exhausted but wired. She made coffee and sat at the kitchen table, the letter spread out in front of her again. Tom came down and found her like that, still in her pajamas, reading it for what must have been the 20th time. You didn't sleep, he said. It wasn't a question. Couldn't, Rebecca admitted. I keep going back and forth. 1 minute I think I should definitely go. The next minute I think it's a terrible idea. Tom poured himself coffee and sat down across from her. What's making you hesitate? Rebecca struggled to put it into words. I don't know if I'm ready to go through all that pain again. What if we meet and it's awkward? What if we realize we have nothing in common anymore? What if she says something that hurts me? Or I say something that hurts her and we end up right back where we started? Those are all possibilities, Tom agreed. But what if it goes well? What if you walk in there and it feels like no time has passed at all? What if you get your sister back? That almost scares me more, Rebecca said quietly. Because then I'll have to face how much time we've wasted. 15 years, Tom. 15 years of birthdays and holidays and regular Tuesday afternoons. I missed her entire pregnancy. I never met her daughter. She doesn't know our kids. That's a lot to have lost over something so stupid. She put her head in her hands. Maybe it's easier to just leave it alone. We've both moved on. We have separate lives now. Maybe trying to force ourselves back together would just make everything worse. Tom reached across the table and took her hand. Honey, I don't think either of you has actually moved on. Moving on would mean you don't think about her anymore. Moving on would mean you don't get sad when you see sisters together at the mall. Moving on would mean you didn't keep that old photo of the two of you hidden in your desk drawer. Rebecca looked up sharply. You know about that photo? I've known about it for years, Tom said gently. I've seen you take it out and look at it when you think no one's watching. You haven't moved on, Rebecca. You've just been living with a wound that never healed. The truth of his words hit her hard. He was right. She'd been carrying this hurt around for 15 years like a backpack full of rocks, pretending it wasn't heavy, pretending it didn't slow her down. Over the next few days, Rebecca thought of little else. She went through the motions of her regular life. She took the kids to school, went to work, made dinner, helped with homework, but her mind was somewhere else, working through the same questions over and over. On Wednesday, she called her best friend Linda. They'd known each other since college, long enough that Linda remembered Claire from back before the fight. She wants to meet for coffee, Rebecca explained after telling Linda about the letter. And? Linda asked. What's the problem? Go meet her. It's not that simple. Actually, it kind of is, Linda said. Look, I know you're scared, but you've been miserable about this for 15 years. Maybe it's time to do something about it. What if it doesn't work out? Then at least you tried, Linda said. At least you won't spend the rest of your life wondering what might have happened if you'd been brave enough to show up. That phrase stuck with Rebecca. Brave enough to show up? Was that what it came down to? Just having the courage to walk through a door? Thursday night at dinner, Amy brought it up again. Did you read the letter from Aunt Claire yet? Rebecca glanced at Tom. I did. What did it say? Rebecca hesitated, then decided her daughter deserved to know the truth. She wants to meet me for coffee. This Saturday, Amy's face lit up. Are you going to go? I don't know yet. Why not? Amy asked, her voice rising with 12-year-old passion. Mom, she's your sister. You have to go. It's more complicated than that, sweetie. No, it's not, Amy insisted. You're just scared. The words, spoken with such innocent certainty by her daughter, cut right through all of Rebecca's careful rationalization. Because Amy was right. She was scared. Scared of getting hurt again. Scared of being disappointed. Scared of hoping for something and having it not work out. That night, Rebecca pulled out her old photo albums. She hadn't looked at them in years, but suddenly she needed to remember. She needed to see who she and Claire had been before everything fell apart. There they were at ages 6 and 9, gap-toothed and sunburned at the beach. At 10 and 13, dressed up for a school dance. At 15 and 18, sitting on the hood of their dad's old car. At 20 and 23, bridesmaids in their cousin's wedding. In every single photo, they were touching. Arms around each other, heads leaning together, hands clasped. They looked happy. They looked like they belonged together. Rebecca thought about Natalie, looking at similar photos and asking her mother about the mystery woman who appeared in all of them. She thought about how it must have felt for that 14-year-old girl to discover she had an entire aunt she'd never known about. And she thought about her own kids, Amy and Ben, who had grown up thinking their mom was an only child. What message was she sending them? That family was disposable? That when things got hard, you just walked away and never looked back? Friday morning, Rebecca woke up and realized she'd made her decision. She was going to go. She was terrified, but she was going to do it anyway. She told Tom at breakfast, I'm going to meet her. His face broke into a huge smile. I'm proud of you. Don't be proud yet, Rebecca said nervously. I might still chicken out. You won't, Tom said with confidence she didn't feel. That day at work was the longest of Rebecca's life. She couldn't concentrate on anything. She kept checking the clock, even though the meeting wasn't until tomorrow. She rewrote the same email 4 times. She had to ask her coworker to repeat himself 3 times during a meeting because she wasn't paying attention. By the time she got home, her nerves were completely shot. She stood in her closet for 20 minutes trying to figure out what to wear to a coffee meeting with your estranged sister. Everything felt wrong. Too casual made it seem like she didn't care. Too dressy made it seem like she was trying too hard. She finally gave up and decided to wait until tomorrow to worry about it. That evening, Amy found her sitting on the couch staring into space. You're really nervous, aren't you? Her daughter asked, sitting down next to her. Is it that obvious? Pretty much, Amy said with a small smile. But that's okay. Being nervous means you care. Rebecca pulled her daughter close. When did you get so wise? I learned from the best, Amy said, leaning into her mother's side. Later, after the kids were in bed, Tom found Rebecca in the kitchen again making a cup of tea she probably wouldn't drink. You know what I keep thinking about? Rebecca said suddenly. That day of Mom's funeral. Not the fight, but earlier in the day. Before everything went wrong. Tom waited, letting her talk. Claire and I were standing outside the funeral home waiting for the service to start, and she said something like, we'll get through this together, and squeezed my hand. And I remember thinking, thank God I have her. Thank God I'm not going through this alone. And then, just a few hours later, we were screaming at each other and I was thinking, I'll never forgive her for this. Rebecca's voice broke. How did we get from one moment to the other so fast? How did we let ourselves destroy something so important over something so small? Because you were both hurt and grieving and not thinking clearly, Tom said. Because sometimes pain makes us do things we wouldn't normally do. But that was 15 years ago, Rebecca. You're both different people now. Maybe it's time to see if those different people can find a way forward. Rebecca nodded, wiping her eyes. I'm going to try. That's all anyone can do, Tom said. Just try. Saturday morning arrived too quickly. Rebecca had barely slept again despite being exhausted. She got up early and took a long shower, trying to wash away the nerves along with the soap. She must have changed her outfit 5 times before finally settling on jeans and a simple sweater, casual but put together, the kind of thing you might wear to meet an old friend. Except Claire wasn't an old friend. She was her sister, her only sister, the person who had known her longer than anyone except their parents, the person who had once been her best friend in the entire world. As 2 o'clock approached, Rebecca's hands started shaking. She'd told Tom she needed to go alone, that this was something she had to do by herself. But now, pulling into the parking lot of the daily grind, she desperately wished he was with her. The coffee shop was in a small strip mall, nestled between a dry cleaner and a dentist's office. Rebecca had never been here before. It was completely neutral territory, just like Claire had promised. No memories, no history, just a blank slate. Rebecca sat in her car for a full 5 minutes watching people go in and out of the coffee shop. Her heart was pounding so hard she could hear it in her ears. Her hands were sweating despite the cool October air. She thought about starting the car and driving away. Claire would wait for an hour, the letter had said. Then she'd leave. And maybe that would be for the best. Maybe some things were better left in the past. But then Rebecca thought about Amy's words. You're just scared. And Tom's voice. Just try. And Natalie's face in that photo, with Rebecca's own smile looking back at her. She thought about 15 years of silence, of missed birthdays and holidays, of family she'd never met, of a sister she'd lost over pride and stubbornness and an inability to forgive, and she thought about what she wanted for the next 15 years. Did she want them to look like the last 15, full of regret and what-ifs and lonely holidays? Rebecca took a deep breath, grabbed her purse, and opened the car door. Her legs felt shaky as she walked across the parking lot. The bell above the coffee shop door chimed as she pushed it open. And there, sitting at a small table in the corner, looking just as nervous as Rebecca felt, was Claire. For a moment, Rebecca forgot how to breathe. There was her sister, sitting in a coffee shop, looking older but somehow exactly the same. Claire's hair was shorter than Rebecca remembered, with a few strands of gray at the temples. She wore glasses now, small wire-framed ones that made her look professional. But her eyes, those dark brown eyes that Rebecca knew as well as her own, were unmistakable. Those eyes met Rebecca's across the crowded coffee shop, and time seemed to stop. Claire stood up so quickly she almost knocked over her chair. Her hand flew to her mouth. For several seconds they just stared at each other, separated by maybe 30 feet and 15 years of silence. Then, slowly, Rebecca started walking toward the table. Each step felt enormous, like crossing a canyon instead of a coffee shop. Claire moved around the table, meeting her halfway. They stopped about 3 feet apart, neither sure what to do next. Hug? Shake hands? Just sit down? You came, Claire said, her voice shaking. I wasn't sure you would. I almost didn't, Rebecca admitted. Her own voice sounded strange to her ears. They stood there awkwardly for another moment, and then Claire let out a small, nervous laugh. This is weird, right? This is so weird. Despite everything, Rebecca felt a smile tugging at her lips. So weird. Should we sit? Claire gestured at the table. I got here early and already ordered, but I can get you something. What do you want? Coffee, tea? They have these really good lattes with caramel. I remember, Rebecca said quietly. You always loved caramel. Claire's eyes filled with tears. You remember that? I remember everything, Rebecca said, and realized it was true. She remembered Claire's favorite color, purple, her favorite movie, The Princess Bride, which they'd watched probably 50 times together. The way she used to sing off-key in the shower. How she couldn't eat peanut butter without getting it all over her face even as an adult. They sat down across from each other. A waitress came over and Rebecca ordered a coffee, just to have something to do with her hands. When they were alone again, the silence stretched between them like a physical thing. Claire spoke first. Thank you for coming. I know it took a lot of courage. I'm not sure it was courage, Rebecca said. I think it was more like I couldn't live with myself if I didn't show up. Still, Claire said, you're here. That's what matters, another silence. This one was even more awkward than the first. Rebecca looked around the coffee shop, at the other people having normal conversations, wishing she had any idea what to say to her sister. "I'm sorry," they both said at the same time, and then let out surprised laughs. "You first," Claire said. Rebecca shook her head. "No, you. You reached out. You wrote the letter. You go first." Claire took a deep breath. "Okay. I'm sorry for what I said at Mom's funeral. I was cruel and angry and I took it out on you. I'm sorry for letting so much time pass without trying to fix things. I'm sorry for robbing Natalie of the chance to know you, and for robbing your kids of the chance to know me. I'm sorry for 15 years of stubbornness and pride." Rebecca felt tears running down her face before she even realized she was crying. "I'm sorry too. I said terrible things that day, things I didn't mean, and I'm sorry I never picked up the phone. I'm sorry I let my pride get in the way of my love for you. The jewelry thing was so stupid," Claire said, wiping her own eyes. "So incredibly stupid. Looking back, I can't even believe that's what we fought about." "I know," Rebecca agreed. "I've thought about it 1,000 times. If I could go back and change it, I would in a heartbeat." "Me too," Claire said. "But we can't go back. We can only go forward." The waitress brought Rebecca's coffee, giving them both a moment to compose themselves. When she left, Claire pulled out her phone. "Can I show you some pictures of Natalie? I know I sent you one, but I have so many more." "Please," Rebecca said, eager for something concrete to focus on. Claire swiped through her phone, showing Rebecca image after image of her daughter, Natalie as a baby, with Claire's dark hair and those eyes that Rebecca had recognized immediately. Natalie as a toddler, covered in birthday cake and grinning. Natalie at 5, missing her front teeth. Natalie at 10, holding a trophy from a soccer game. Natalie last week making a silly face at the camera. "She's beautiful," Rebecca said, and meant it. "She really wants to meet you," Claire said. "She's been asking about you every single day since I told her. She wants to know everything. What you're like. What you do for work. If you have kids her age. If you like the same things she likes." "I have 2 kids," Rebecca said. "Amy is 12 and Ben is 9. They don't know about you either." "Well, they didn't until a few days ago." Claire's face fell. "I guess we both kept a lot of secrets." "Yeah," Rebecca agreed. She pulled out her own phone and showed Claire pictures of her children.
Amy with her dark curly hair and big smile.
Ben with his glasses and serious expression. "They're wonderful," Claire said, studying each photo carefully. "Ben looks like Dad." "Everyone says that," Rebecca said, and felt a pang. They'd lost both their parents now. Their dad had died 7 years ago. She'd seen Claire at that funeral too, across the cemetery, but they'd both maintained their distance. "I should have come over to you at Dad's funeral," Claire said, as if reading her mind. "I saw you there. I wanted to talk to you so badly, but I didn't know how after so many years." "I saw you too," Rebecca admitted. "I wrote out a whole speech in my head about what I would say if I got the chance. But then the service ended and you left and I lost my nerve." They sat in silence for a moment, both processing how many opportunities they'd let slip away. "Tell me about your life," Claire said suddenly. "I want to know everything." "Are you happy? What do you do for work? How did you meet your husband?" So Rebecca told her. About Tom, who she'd met at a friend's barbecue 6 years ago. About her job as an accountant, which wasn't exciting but paid the bills and let her work from home sometimes. About Amy's love of soccer and Ben's obsession with dinosaurs. About the house they'd bought 3 years ago, with the yard that was constantly full of toys and neighborhood kids. Claire listened to every word like it was the most important thing she'd ever heard. She asked questions and laughed at the funny parts and looked sad when Rebecca talked about how hard the divorce from her first husband had been. Then it was Claire's turn. She told Rebecca about her husband, David, who she'd married 12 years ago. About her job as a teacher, working with second graders who kept her young and exhausted at the same time. About Natalie's love of music and art, how she wanted to be a painter when she grew up. About the small house they rented in a neighborhood full of families just like theirs. An hour passed, then 2. The coffee shop got busier and then quieter as the afternoon wore on. They ordered more coffee. Then sandwiches they barely touched because they were too busy talking. Eventually, inevitably, they circled back to the fight. "The thing I keep thinking about," Rebecca said slowly, "is that none of it actually mattered. The jewelry, I mean. None of it was really about Mom's necklace or her earrings. It was about grief and pain and not knowing how to process losing her. I know, Claire agreed. I was so angry that day. Not at you, really. Just angry at the universe for taking Mom away. For her being sick for so long. For the unfairness of it all. And you were there and we disagreed about something small and all that anger just poured out. Me too, Rebecca said. And then I was too proud to apologize. Every day that passed made it harder to reach out. I kept thinking, it's been too long now. She probably doesn't even want to hear from me. I thought the same thing, Claire said. I'd think about calling you, but then I'd convince myself you'd just hang up on me. That you were better off without me in your life. I was never better off without you, Rebecca said firmly. Not for one single day. Claire reached across the table and took Rebecca's hand. It was the first time they'd touched in 15 years, and the contact sent a jolt through Rebecca's whole body. Can we try again? Claire asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Can we figure out how to be sisters again? Rebecca squeezed her sister's hand. I'd like that. I don't know if it'll be easy. We might mess it up. We might have more arguments, but I want to try. Me too, Claire said, tears streaming down her face. Me too. They sat like that for a long moment, holding hands across the table, both crying, both smiling. I've missed you so much, Claire said. Every birthday, every holiday, every stupid Tuesday afternoon when something funny happened and I wanted to call you and tell you about it. I've missed you every single day. I've missed you too, Rebecca said, more than I knew how to say. When they finally left the coffee shop, the sun was starting to set. They stood in the parking lot, neither wanting to say goodbye. Can we do this again? Claire asked. Soon? Yes, Rebecca said without hesitation. How about next weekend? And maybe we could bring the kids? I think it's time our families met. Claire's face lit up. Natalie would love that. She's going to be so excited when I tell her I actually got to see you. They hugged then properly for the first time in 15 years. Rebecca held on tight, feeling like she was holding a piece of herself that had been missing for too long. I love you, Claire whispered. I love you too, Rebecca whispered back. They stood there in the parking lot until the sky turned pink and gold, talking and laughing and making plans. Making up for lost time, figuring out how to be sisters again. Rebecca drove home in a daze, her mind spinning with everything that had just happened. The conversation had lasted nearly 4 hours, and now the sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. She kept replaying moments in her head. Claire's laugh, which was exactly the same as it had always been. The way her sister's face lit up when talking about Natalie. The feeling of hugging her again after so many years. When she walked through her front door, Tom and the kids were in the living room. All three of them looked up expectantly. Well? Tom asked. Rebecca felt a smile spread across her face, probably the biggest smile she'd had in 15 years. It was good. Really good. Amy jumped up and ran over. You're going to see her again, right? Next weekend, Rebecca confirmed. And you guys are all going to come meet her family. I have an aunt, Amy said wonderingly. And a cousin. You do, Rebecca said, pulling her daughter into a hug. And I think you're going to love them. That night after the kids were in bed, Rebecca told Tom everything. About the awkward start, the tears, the hours of talking, about how strange it had been to look across the table at Claire and see both a stranger and the person who'd known her longest in the world. I'm really proud of you, Tom said. I know how scared you were. I'm still scared, Rebecca admitted. What if it doesn't work out? What if we try this and realize we can't actually be in each other's lives? Then at least you tried, Tom said. But I don't think that's going to happen. You should have seen your face when you came home. I haven't seen you look that happy in years. Over the next week, Rebecca and Claire texted constantly. Small things at first. Claire sending a funny meme. Rebecca sharing a photo of Ben's latest dinosaur drawing. Then longer conversations. Memories they'd forgotten. Plans for the weekend. Questions about each other's lives. It felt like learning to walk again after a long time of being unable to move. Sometimes it was easy and natural. Sometimes it was awkward and they didn't quite know what to say. But they kept at it, both determined not to let silence grow between them again. Rebecca told her kids more about their aunt. She pulled out the old photo albums and showed them pictures of her and Claire as children. Amy was fascinated by the images of her mother as a young girl and kept asking questions about what Rebecca and Claire used to do together. Did you fight a lot? Amy asked. Sometimes, Rebecca admitted. All siblings fight. But mostly we had fun together. And then you had a really big fight, Amy said. And stopped talking. Yeah, Rebecca said. We let one fight turn into 15 years of not talking, which was really stupid of both of us. But now you're fixing it, Amy said. That's what matters, right? That's what matters, Rebecca agreed, hoping her daughter was right. Saturday came faster than Rebecca expected. She was nervous again, but it was a different kind of nervous than before. This time she was worried about the kids' meeting. What if they didn't get along? What if it was awkward? What if Amy or Ben said something that upset Natalie or vice versa? They'd agreed to meet at a park, somewhere neutral where the kids could play while the adults talked. Rebecca arrived first, her stomach full of butterflies. Tom squeezed her hand reassuringly. Then Claire's car pulled into the parking lot, and Rebecca watched as her sister got out, followed by a tall man who must be David, and then a teenage girl with dark hair and that familiar smile. Natalie. Rebecca's niece looked so much like the photos, but seeing her in person was different. She was real. She was here. She was family. The two families approached each other slowly. There was a moment of awkward hellos and introductions. Then Natalie surprised everyone by walking straight up to Rebecca and hugging her. I'm so glad I finally get to meet you, the girl said. Rebecca hugged her back, fighting tears. Me too, sweetheart. Me too. David and Tom shook hands and immediately started talking about sports, finding common ground. Amy hung back shyly at first, but Natalie noticed and walked over. You're Amy, right? My mom told me you play soccer. I play too. And just like that, the ice was broken. Within minutes, the girls were chatting like old friends, comparing teams and favorite players. Ben was more hesitant, but when Natalie asked him about the dinosaur book he was carrying, he opened up completely, launching into an enthusiastic explanation of the difference between different types of raptors. The adults watched, amazed at how easy it was for the kids. They're naturals at this, Claire said quietly to Rebecca. Maybe because they don't have 15 years of baggage, Rebecca replied. They spent 3 hours at the park. The kids played on the playground while the adults sat on benches and talked. Sometimes it was the four of them in one conversation. Sometimes it was Rebecca and Claire catching up while Tom and David talked about work. Sometimes it was all 6 of them together, laughing at a joke or watching the kids. When it was time to leave, Amy surprised Rebecca by asking, Can we do this again? Like all the time? I hope so, Rebecca said. How about next weekend? Claire suggested. You could all come over for dinner at our place. Or we could host, Rebecca offered. Let's trade off, David suggested. This week at your place, next week at ours. And that's exactly what they did. The following Saturday, Claire's family came to Rebecca's house. Rebecca cooked too much food, nervous about making a good impression. But Claire helped in the kitchen and they fell into an easy rhythm, talking and laughing while they prepared dinner. Natalie and Amy discovered they both loved the same TV shows and spent the evening trading theories about upcoming episodes. Ben showed everyone his extensive dinosaur collection and gave an impromptu lecture on the Cretaceous period. The adults played board games after dinner, and for a while it felt like no time had passed at all. But there were still difficult moments. A few weeks later, Rebecca and Claire had their first real disagreement since reuniting. It was about something small, a misunderstanding about scheduling. But suddenly they were both tense, remembering how a small disagreement had once torn them apart. They caught themselves, though. Recognized what was happening. We're doing it again, Claire said quietly. Yeah, Rebecca agreed, but we don't have to. We can just talk about this like adults and figure it out. So they did. They explained their perspectives, found a compromise, and moved on. And that became their pattern. When tension arose, they addressed it instead of letting it fester. They apologized when they needed to. They gave each other grace when things got hard. The holidays that year were different than any Rebecca had experienced in 15 years. They had Thanksgiving together. Both families crowded around Rebecca's dining table, which had been extended with a folding table to fit everyone. Claire brought her famous pumpkin pie, and Rebecca made the stuffing recipe their mother used to make. During dinner, Natalie asked about their grandparents. Rebecca and Claire looked at each other, then spent the next hour telling stories. About their mom's terrible sense of direction, which meant every family road trip became an adventure. About their dad's horrible jokes that somehow always made them laugh anyway. About family traditions and old memories. The kids listened, fascinated, learning about grandparents they'd never met but could know through stories. And Rebecca realized that this was part of healing too, not just rebuilding her relationship with Claire, but connecting her children to their family history, to the people who had come before. Christmas was at Claire's house. The kids opened presents together, and Rebecca watched as Amy gave Natalie a friendship bracelet she'd made herself, and Natalie gave Amy a painting she'd created. Ben got art supplies from his aunt and uncle, and spent the afternoon drawing pictures for everyone. Claire and Rebecca sat on the couch together, watching their families interact, and Rebecca thought about that letter, that cream-colored envelope that had arrived on a rainy October day and changed everything. "Thank you," Rebecca said quietly to her sister. "For what?" "For being brave enough to write that letter. For finding me. For giving us a chance to fix this." Claire squeezed her hand. "Thank you for being brave enough to show up." By spring, the two families had fallen into a comfortable routine. They saw each other at least twice a month, sometimes more. The kids had sleepovers. The adults went out for double dates. They celebrated birthdays together and had backyard barbecues in the summer. It wasn't perfect. They still had disagreements occasionally. Sometimes old hurt would bubble up unexpectedly, triggered by something that reminded them of the years they'd lost. But now they had tools to deal with it. They talked things through. They went to therapy together once when things got particularly tough, working through the grief and regret with a professional's help. One evening, almost a year after that first coffee meeting, Rebecca was looking through her phone at photos from a recent family gathering. Pictures of all of them together. The kids playing, the adults laughing. Multiple generations of family connected despite the years that had tried to separate them. Tom came up behind her and looked over her shoulder. "That's a good picture," he said, pointing to one of Rebecca and Claire with their arms around each other, both smiling genuinely at the camera. "Yeah," Rebecca agreed. "It really is." She thought about the letter again, which she still kept in her nightstand drawer. 3 pages that had rebuilt a bridge she'd thought was permanently burned. She thought about how close she'd come to not opening it, to not showing up at that coffee shop, to letting fear and pride win one more time. "I'm glad she sent that letter," Rebecca said. "Me too," Tom said. "I like having Claire around. She's good for you." He was right. Having her sister back in her life had changed something fundamental in Rebecca. A piece of her that had been missing for 15 years was back in place. She felt more whole, more complete, more herself. The following week, Claire called her on a random Tuesday afternoon. "Hey," Claire said, "I was just thinking about that time we tried to bake Mom's chocolate cake and accidentally used salt instead of sugar." Rebecca laughed. "And we ate it anyway because we didn't want to admit we'd messed up." "It was so awful," Claire said, laughing too. "The worst," Rebecca agreed. They talked for an hour about nothing in particular. About their days, their kids, a funny thing that had happened at work. The kind of casual, comfortable conversation that siblings have when they're in each other's lives. When they hung up, Rebecca sat for a moment, feeling grateful. Grateful for second chances. Grateful for sisters who were brave enough to reach out. Grateful for her own courage in responding.